Mr. Secretary, does the Department of Labor have a specific counterproposal, Senator Portman's or any other, to extending the $600 benefit past July?
Senator Whitehouse, I don't have a particular proposal that I would want to air at this hearing.
Okay.
I certainly am interested in discussing what steps might be taken. I've already
You answered my question.
I think it would help the viewers to know
please, Mr. Secretary, you have tried to talk over us through this whole hearing. That was a simple question. Just let me go through my questions, would you please? The second question is with respect to the fraud investigations in unemployment insurance. We are seeing in Rhode Island and in other states a fraud that looks like it is massive, coordinated, and perhaps driven from overseas. How much of a priority is investigating and remedying that fraud for your department? High, low, super high? Give me a measure.
To complete my answer, because I'm sorry, I had not completed my answer to your question. I have had a conversation with Ranking Member Wyden about this, what we might do going forward, and I look forward to further discussions on those lines. With respect to, Senator Whitehouse, with respect to fraud on the unemployment insurance system, it is a very high priority for us. We recognize that unemployment insurance fraud has always been a long-standing problem in the system. We recognize that because of the size, the prominence of the CARES program, it's become an acute problem. And so it's one that I am certainly personally spending my time working with my staff to address. And I know you have more questions, so I won't repeat everything I said earlier, but we're working with the states,
you're having fun
federal partners and
us.
others.
This has become a little bit of a sport for you to filibuster us and kind of yuck it up. I don't think that's fair to us. With respect to the OSHA guidelines related to COVID, what is the difference between an OSHA guideline and an OSHA emergency temporary standard with respect to enforceability?
A standard is a legally enforceable rule, which we already have a number of that we believe we can use for enforcement with respect to COVID. We also have a statutory tool that we can use for
But to be clear, the COVID-related guidelines that you spoke about earlier are not standards that OSHA is capable of enforcing against. It is only if they overlap with another pre-existing actual standard that you can enforce against them. Is that not a correct statement of the law?
That's respectfully not entirely true, actually. Guidelines that we issue, which are consistent with those issued by the CDC and those adopted by industries, recommended by unions and the like, establish a legal background at which I believe we can bring a general duty clause action if we need to. The other difference between guidelines and a standard is the degree.
May I read you something from your website? OSHA's guidelines are advisory, do not create new employer obligations, and are not the basis for citations. And then further down, it actually says the recommendations contained as guidelines are not enforceable under the general duty standards either. So it looks to me like it's hard to enforce.
Respectfully, I was the chief legal officer at the department, so I'm here to ask I was the chief legal officer at the department previously. And as I said, a guideline can provide part of the background for an action. The other difference between a guideline
but background
and a
and
standard is the
enforceability are two different
flexibility
things, are
a
they
guideline
not?
gives us.
Final point, there's been a lot of, I think, scorn heaped on the $600 a week benefit, which propped up probably close to 40 million families now through this crisis. And the people are overpaid and idle and all of that. But just for context in evaluating that narrative, I would also remind everybody who's watching this hearing that 43,000 Americans who enjoy incomes over $1 million got a benefit from the CARES legislation amounting on average to over $1.6 million each not for their businesses, but flowing back to their personal tax returns. The amount that flowed back to individuals earning over $1 million each to their personal tax returns as a result of this, 1.6 million on average for those 43,000 people, was over $100 billion. So let's just bear that in mind as we evaluate what it means to a family struggling to get by to have an extra $600. I think we probably do need to rethink this program, but it would help if we had a proposal from the Department of Labor. Thank you. My time is up.